This morning in our Sunday Spotlight, what the heck is happening? Why is winter so hard to find this year? Chief Meteorologist Mark Dixon, help us understand what's going on. He is in the Weather Center, and he's here to answer the questions everyone has. I hear it everywhere I go, Mark. Everyone's talking about this, the lack of snow, the warm temperatures. Yep. Everyone on the street's talking about it, and it's got to be the talk of the Weather Center.
Oh, it is for sure. I mean, it's a remarkable winter in both of those realms, temperature and precipitation, snow and rain. So we came off a very mild and wet December that carried right over into January.
So you've been given the forecast. I've been sitting at the anchor desk for a lot of years together, and you know I don't get all that excited about the weather, but one stat that I watched closely was this whole idea about the high temperatures at Bradley in the month of January. Something really remarkable happened.
Yeah, so first and foremost, records for the Hartford area date back to 1905, so it's a pretty long period of record. And for each day, the average temperature was above average, so that was pretty notable on its own. But to the stat that you're speaking of, there was not one of the 31 days where the high temperature was below freezing. So that is remarkable, at first, since 1905.
So we had a shutout for the whole month. And as we tracked through it, I kept looking at that 7-day saying, okay, we got to get so many more days. I was into it. This was a 1905. That's a chase, a record I'm excited about. But it's not just that. There's a lot of other stats we can point to.
Yeah, so looking again at the month of January alone, the average temperature for the 31-day period, 36.6 degrees. That's 9.5 degrees above average. Only 2.3 inches of snow, so that's the 12th least snowy on record. But it was certainly wet. So given how mild it has been, the third warmest January on record, a lot of rain came down, and that precipitation total also includes the liquid equivalent of those 2.3 inches of snow, but a tie for 10th wettest. So given how mild it has been, of course, and all the rain we have seen, the snow deficits continue to grow. So this is specifically for the Hartford area as measured at Bradley Airport, also for Bridgeport. To date, through the 12th of February, so through today, we're closing in on a 2-foot deficit for Hartford and just over a 1.5-foot deficit for Bridgeport.
Now, you said it's been wet, though, and I feel like a lot of these storms, you know, Scott's line is it's going to be wet, not white. Mm-hmm. Can we translate that? Can we say, well, geez, if we had just had normal temperatures, it would have been a blockbuster snow season, or does it not quite work like that?
It's hard to draw that correlation, but yes, given an active weather pattern and as well colder, if we had the colder air, then yes, we would have obviously seen more snow.
No, we're also talking about maybe season-wide. If the season were to stop today, which it's not gonna, but if it did, if we got no more snow in February, tell us what could happen.
So this kind of get a little nerdy on a Sunday morning, not to go too deep into the weeds here, but we first have meteorological winter. So we break the 12 months of the year up into equal parts. So winter is December, January, February. We're about halfway through February. So we're closing in on the end of meteorological winter. So for the Hartford area, with only 8.6 inches in that window of time, it would be the third least snowy. And of course, we have sometimes snow in December, sometimes October, but that time span for the entirety of the season right now, 9.4 inches. So that would be the least snowy if we didn't receive any more snow through the early spring months. For Bridgeport, we haven't even measured an inch of snow. So for both of those categories, certainly the least snowy on record.
Now, I live down by the shoreline. I grew up down by the shoreline, and I feel like a lot of people are saying wherever we go, wherever I'm talking to people about the weather, they're saying it changed. You know, when I was a kid growing up in East Lyme, it was snowier, Mark. We had more snow days. We plowed more. We were sledding every single day all winter. But it turns out the stats don't back me up.
So I think there's some psychological aspect to that. You know, you kind of maybe romanticize your childhood, or you think that things are much bigger when you're smaller.
I walked uphill to school both ways.
Both ways, right? Yeah. So in the meteorological community, we talk about normals over a 30-year period. So our most recent period of record is 1991 through 2020. And for the Hartford area, that includes or averages out to 51.7 inches, which is notably higher than the prior 30-year. And this is it's not rolling 30 years, it's 3 decades that we look at. So from 1981 to 2010, the average, the norm of snow for the Hartford area, 40.5 inches. Now, there were some voids, some missing data at times in that 30-year span, but regardless, it is a step upward.
And so what that would speak to is if people are feeling like, well, that's it, we're not going to, winter doesn't exist anymore along the Connecticut shore, or even inland, and even in Hartford. That's it. You know, there's climate change or whatever you want to blame. Winter's canceled. That's not the case.
Right. There are many factors that play into what happens here in New England, here in Connecticut, region-wide. Again, not to go too deep into things, but some of those global factors include the North Atlantic oscillation, which is currently positive. There's El Nino. We're now in a 3-year stretch of El Nino, which has only happened 3 other times since 1950. So there are indications we're coming out of La Nina. And then also there's the polar vortex that obviously we hear a lot about. So with the polar vortex right now, it's fairly stable. So that prevents, big intrusions of cold Arctic air. So what we've been dealing with so far this season has been harsh but brief, because we had the pre-Christmas blast of Arctic air, didn't last long, and then also what we had earlier this month, from Friday into Saturday of last weekend, we saw temperatures reach record lows at both Hartford, Bradley, and also for Bridgeport. And then by Monday, we saw temperatures reach record highs in Bridgeport, and we're coming off of as well record warmth to end the week.
I know well enough to not ask you to predict the future. Usually when I'm texting with you, it's like, hey, I'm trying to sneak in a round of golf, or I got a baseball game that I don't want to get rained out. But we do have some indication of what's coming. You can't give me a high temperature for February 28th, but we can look at some hints. What can you tell us?
So factoring in some of those global considerations, there's also, of course, something known as this rapid warming of the stratosphere, sudden warming. So a little too early to tell exactly what that would translate to, but the Climate Prediction Center, this is a wing of NOAA, they do a 6 to 10 day outlook. So the bright, deep colors here of red indicate warmer than normal conditions over the next 6 to 10 days. Not the magnitude of warmth, but the likelihood, the probability of that. So that's 6 to 10 days. Let me take you now 8 to 14 days. We're still in that warmer than normal category. So there is, some hope, for that sudden stratospheric warming to maybe bring a little winter in over the next several weeks, but we'll have to see how that unfolds.
But the trend is still looking like more of the same.
I mean,
speaks for itself.
There you go. Yep.
Chief Meteorologist Mark Dixon, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that is CT23 for this week. CBS Sunday Morning is coming up next. We'll, of course, see you next week back here in Studio A, but back on the other side of Studio A. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you next week.